Boy, I tell you, the details of all of this are absolutely stunning. That prosecutor weighing in as a mom, and I quote her there. We'll talk about the legalities and implications of all of it now. We do want to welcome to the show two of our guests who are here today, Cheryl Casone and Steve Hilton, because we have been talking about this with the three of us, Kaylee and Emily. So, Steve and Cheryl, thank you very much. Steve, I do want to go to you first to first welcome you into the program and with the breaking news, get your thoughts on it.
Well, first of all, I just want to say an instant reaction to that prosecutor there. I thought she gave an incredibly impressive performance there, both professional in terms of the way she laid out the facts, but also a lot of humanity there. And I think that is something that was really striking. Let's move to the details of this case, and then I have a broader point I'd like to make. First of all, as you just said, the facts that were laid out there, absolutely devastating in relation to the role of the parents here. And I think, anyone would look at that and say that this approach that the prosecutor is taking is completely justified in terms of the parents. But the thing that really leapt out at me, and you saw a question about that at the end, a couple of questions, particularly a strong one at the end, was the role of the school. And that phrase that we heard, that the child was returned to the classroom. And the prosecutor said there that she said, I don't want to chastise anybody. I think anyone listening to that would say, yes, we do want to chastise the school that returned that kid to the classroom after the facts that were laid out today. That is an astonishing revelation, and I think needs further follow-up. But the broader point I want to end on is when you hear something like this, we have to think about what's going on in our society, that you have families that have got to this point where you have 15-year-olds that are thinking like this, behaving like this, parents that are thinking and behaving like this. And I've said this before on this show and elsewhere, the way we raise our children, the way we think about family life in this country, it's the single most important issue. It affects everything else. Obviously here today, we're talking about the very, very extreme end of that. But right across the board, when you see kids that are addicted to their phones, you see family breakdown, you see so much going wrong with the way we raise children in this country, the way we think about family, we've got to prioritize it much more in our political arguments, because there are things that we can do. We don't just throw our hands up and say, well, this is the way modern life is. We can do something about it, and we should do something about it, as well as focus on the specifics of this case.
I have to say, just from a really honest place, I can exhale when I hear you talking like that. Like I was somewhat holding my breath as a parent. Kaylee, you were too. I mean, we were just gulping a little bit. And hearing you talk about it like that, Steve, allows us to just exhale. Like, it's okay to care about every single person in this scenario and want better for every single person in this scenario, and not let anybody off the hook if there is one that is needed to be laid down. Like, I that's what you express, and it is raw, it is real, and it feels necessary. Cheryl, as we watch this, we're going to learn more about this case, and it then becomes more forensic going forward, I feel like. There were certain things that Prosecutor McDonald said, I can't say this, I can't say that. And we get that. We've watched enough cases, we've covered them now. We cannot jump to conclusions about how a case and its charges are going to lay out. Your thoughts?
What I found most interesting was the role of technology and social media in this case, as she was speaking about the fact that the teacher saw the note on the desk of him and took a picture. That's all evidence this prosecutor can use. We debate and we analyze and we demonize a lot of times social media. We demonize technology. There's been all these privacy fights around the use of a phone, the use of social media accounts. In this particular case, social media is what is going to give that prosecutor the tools to go after not just the son, but also the parents who, and she laid out, I think, a very compelling case as to why they are culpable in this. They basically in her opinion, bought the kid a gun. But at the same time, all of that is going to be used as evidence in the courtroom. And that, I think, is something that we should be, I think if I had lost a child, one of those 4 children that passed away, I'd be grateful to know that there's going to be a strong case built on technology
Evidence.
moving forward.
Yeah, Kaylee.
I've got to tell you, listening as a mom to what we just heard, I mean, my stomach was just churning, because you think about sending your child to school and you're entrusting their care to a principal, to a teacher, to a school system, and losing your child. And imagine watching a press conference after you've just experienced the most grievous loss any person could feel on this earth, and you learn that this individual was one of the 44.3% who articulate their intent in advance, and he did so on a drawing on his desk. It can't be more clear than he drew dead bodies on his desk. The note said, quote, "Thoughts won't stop. Help me. My life is useless. The world is dead." And a teacher caught that note, decided to take a picture of it because it was so alarming, sends him to the principal's office where he's able to alter those notes, scratch them out.
Who allows that to happen?
Who allows it to happen?
You're calling parents in, you've taken a picture of the note, you allow that child to sit there, and the word help is so powerful. We have to have the heart to want to help all the people spherically that are being hurt in these instances. Like,
Yes.
I know it's hard, and that's what Steve has so beautifully said today, or at least my interpretation, Steve. It was so healing to hear you say that you have to care about everybody here because they're all hurting. But if there's culpability, we got to lay that down too. So let's talk about that, Emily. So we were talking as that was playing out with the charges against the parents, and it went pretty much the way that you said it was going to go previous to that, right? So there's got to be something there. What did you see?
So this is my interpretation of it. So first of all, in Michigan, it is not a crime to gift a gun to a minor. I want to be clear about that. Where the laws come into play are possession aspects, which a minor cannot possess a gun in public without the direct supervision of an adult, which is why Crumbley is being charged in part with a weapons offense. But where the parents failed specifically, where the hook is that the involuntary manslaughter charge brings with it a component that if they negligently omit to perform a legal duty, then they are on the hook, whether unintentional or not, for manslaughter. A felony there in the state of Michigan brings with it up to a 15-year jail sentence. And I want to point out specifically where the prosecutor said that they failed. So the parents failed in the fact that, first of all, when they were made aware that he was searching for ammunition, to Cheryl's point about the text messages, the mother made light of it. Jennifer laughed, LOL, just don't get caught. Secondly, the fact that they failed, in the words of the prosecutor, they failed to check the backpack of their son when they were all in the meeting that the teacher called after finding that egregious note that laid out, to your point, a premeditated, really the premeditated evidence, or the evidence that it was premeditated. In that meeting, they failed to search the backpack when they knew they had A, gifted their child the gun, B, he had posed for social media pictures with it saying my Christmas gift, C, had searched for ammo, and D, had drawn that horrifying image that included blood, I am useless, blood everywhere, the thoughts won't stop, help me, laughing emoji, the world is dead. She said they failed to ask if he had a gun, they failed to inspect the backpack for the presence of the gun, and then they resisted the idea of their son leaving the school. Instead, she said, they left the school without their son, and he was returned to the classroom.
All right, two questions for you, just real quickly, follow-ups, right? So I want to try to understand the different culpabilities there for the school, because the school is looking at this through two different lanes.
Right.
One is protecting everybody at the school, and the other is the mental health of the student. And so when you bring the parents in and you say, well, how could they send him back to the classroom? How could they send him back to the classroom?
So the prosecutor answered that, sort of addressed it by saying, criminally, it has not risen to the level she feels of a criminal culpability by the school. Now, we've talked a moment ago about the difference between the mental health accountability the school has, the responsibility they have in that realm, and also criminal accountability. Let's take that off the table for a moment. There, the school specifically said you need to have your child in counseling within 48 hours per their state's regulations of having that really alarming note, as you just said. The teacher documented it, immediately notified the principal, immediately notified the parents, took out the kid immediately. So you could argue from a mental health perspective, they fulfilled their duties.
They did what they were supposed to do.
However, on that, to Steve's point and the prosecutor's point, she said, as a resident, as a mom, it's still egregious and it's horrifying.
Did they ask if the family had a gun? I mean, see, these are the things that are not... That's why when people say, oh, you got to defund the police, if you have a police officer standing in that room, that discussion's different.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is. And
it's a different discussion.
One note, at 1:22 p.m., the mother texted her son, Ethan, don't do it.
Thank
she
you. Yes.
clearly knew he was some sort of threat. And the father, upon learning there had been a shooting, immediately drove home to see if his weapon was there. These parents clearly had an inkling or an understanding that their son was a threat to someone. And the fact that they did not take action and even tell the school that there was a weapon involved in their household that was just purchased on Black Friday. It is beyond negligence, to quote the prosecutor, but I think that is even an understatement.
It'll be interesting to see if there's any evidence of call records too, to see if those parents reached out to anybody, if they reached out to 911. It could be my kid is their wife. Who knows?
Right.
I mean,
Well,
we
that
just
was what
don't
the
know
reporter
enough
asked.
yet.
They said, did anyone call law enforcement, and what was the duty? Was there a duty breached there to fail to notify law enforcement, as we're understanding the course of events that occurred between the school, the parents, and the child there? And the answer clearly was no.
All right. Boy, it's a lot to get to. We'll cover it as it happens. We brought you the first news conference on that with regard to the parents.